it's not lost on any of us, the pain that is out there in the rural area, and the patience is growing thin. You should know that this is originally built in U.S. West and Quest and CenturyLink territory. CenturyLink came up as a rural telecom provider, so that's in our CEO's DNA. He's been the CEO for 28 years. So how we serve rural America is front and center, and broadband is literally our core competency. That's what we do. We've been doing fiber for 30 years since fiber was invented. We have 270,000 route miles of fiber in the U.S., 340,000 internationally. In Minnesota, about 8,000 route miles. We have fiber going right through Chisago County. The challenge is getting it out further and getting the speeds up further. And so the thing I thought might be constructive real quickly is to go a little bit deeper on what the whole CAF funding is all about. In 2011, the federal government kind of shifted funding from what had been funding for rural America phone service into rural America service for expanding broadband. The first version of CAF 1 it was called, kind of fell on its face. It wasn't constructed very well, it wasn't executed very well. CAF 2 has an annual cap of $1.8 billion across the U.S. for a 6-year program. The high cap carriers in this area, CenturyLink, Windstream, Frontier, and Consolidated, were the ones who were eligible for that. The federal government went out and looked at all the census blocks that were either unserved or underserved. In other words, they didn't have a wireline competitor that was greater than 4 down and 1 up. A lot of places fulfilled that, but looked at it at a census block level. As Bob was talking about, carriers are built on wire centers, which don't necessarily overlap census blocks. They're a different animal. So the carriers all had a choice to accept the money or not at a state level. CenturyLink accepted what was $500 million a year for 6 years across our 37 states. In Minnesota, we accepted I think Minnesota overall for CAF got about $86 million across all the carriers. CenturyLink's piece of that was $54 million, again for 6 years. So in exchange for doing that, we have to, in our case, we have to build out in that 6-year period to 114,000 households that are within those federally identified census blocks. So it's a big challenge to figure out what households are there, what households are contiguous to those census blocks that may not have qualified, but may also not be receiving the fast speeds. And then engineer the backbone and start building this thing. So I was explaining to some folks earlier today, part of the challenge is kind of you have to build the super highway first for this. You can't just build out the houses. You can't just really turn on fiber, for example. And so in our case, a lot of the carriers, a lot of the things in the state, they run over the really big, the Autobahn, which we operate at 100 gigabits per second. Many links of that. And the consumption rate it has gone vertical. We can't even keep up with it. So sometimes on the end of the line, there's congestion someplace because of the big internet's being overrun. And you got to build the interstate highway system. We have, in Chisago County, we have about 70 miles of fiber today that really kind of go north and south, more or less through along 35W through North Branch and out through Rush City ultimately, with some spur routes that kind of go sideways. This year we're going to add about 100 miles of more backbone fiber to feed that system, to go deeper into the communities where the CAF funding is. Excuse me. And but what we're going to do is, I think the numbers that were thrown up there, the billions and billions of dollars to build out, that's not even close, in my opinion, to go fiber all the way to all the homes. It is so expensive. And not the fiber itself, a lot of it's the putting the fiber in the ground. It's the labor up front to make that happen, and all the electronics to make that happen. So what a lot of the carriers are doing, I think Frontier and ourselves alike, is while we have fiber to the home products, and we are doing that, we're doing it in the Twin Cities, we're doing it in rural areas where it's greenfield, there's new single single-family home developments that are large enough, we're going to put in fiber all the way to the home, right out of the gate, in most cases. But what we got to do is figure out a way to get some speeds to as many people as possible, as opposed to the fastest speeds to a few. And that's the challenge. And so I saw the examples up there in the 2014, and by the way, we participated in the DEEP grants. We make applications for those. We've done some in partnership with some communities. We haven't always won them. But one of those up there, I think the math was $20 million, 6,100 homes, that's about $3,300 per household passed cost of construction. Okay? So as we're looking at trying to get to as many households as we can to increase our speeds from either nothing or 1.5 or 4 or something, I think most people would say if they could get 10 or 20 or 40, they would prefer that over a fewer number of homes getting a gig or getting 100 meg. So what we're doing is we're taking the fiber we have, we're going deeper into the communities with the D-slams, I call them the electronic refrigerators that sit in the neighborhoods. So by virtue of going further into the neighborhoods, we put in the refrigerators, we then convert the signal to copper, and then we're going to be able to get speeds under the CAF order. We have to provide a minimum speed of 10 by 1, but that's only the households that are furthest away from the refrigerator, as I call it. Those households that are closer are going to get 20, 50, 100. We actually have some technologies. The one slide is a little outdated. We can run some DSL at 200 meg, and there's some other things happening that will go faster. Still distance limited. But the point is, if you're getting nothing or 1.5 out at your place today, if we get that refrigerator closer to you, even if we change nothing else, we can bump that speed up to something faster. And the other thing we're doing contiguous with this is that if there's a census block area that the federal government has defined, and it has to, all of the households in that census block cannot have the faster speeds. If there's a census block that has one household that has 40 megs that's on the edge of a wire center, it might have gotten disqualified. So what we're trying to do is we build these fiber networks into these census block areas to cover them with a hybrid fiber and copper network. We're looking at the other households that are, I'll say, contiguous to those areas. And if I can turn on 40 more households over here, and I'm using some of that co-funding money from the federal government, we're going to be able to turn up more households and get more people satisfied and get them online. So that's a very long-winded story, but I hope that was helpful to the approach.